Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders that help it grow. John Winnick, Clark Capital CEO, founder. Thank you so much for joining us. He's also a director on a CDC, so he's an expert on 504 lending. John, we'd love to have you today. We were going to talk about restaurants, but we'll get to that in a second. Lance and Katie, thank you so much for filling in for us on Friday. I appreciate that. I heard some good things and nothing bad, so congratulations.
We made it through the show, Bob, without any nasty emails. It was a fun time.
Oh, very good, very good. You know how to ask questions. And let's go to the poll questions. Number one, first of all, a bunch of stuff has hit this morning, so we're cheating unless you've read that already. We know the answers, but let's see how close you're going to get. Do you know the Section 1112 guidelines for 7A 504 loans with monthly installments over $9,000? Logistically, what do we do? Oh, 70%, Lance. That's good.
That's excellent. And there were a few things in the guidance today that are helpful, and I'm sure we'll talk about them in a minute.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Now I'm the one who's off script. Number two, is SBA accepting applications for shuttered venue?
I wish I knew the answer to that, Bob.
The answer is no.
Yeah, it's tough, Bob, because this program's been out there and talked about since January.
I thought it was talked about since July of last year, but
it's been around for a while, and no ability for them to apply yet.
Yeah, and Joseph made a good point. I was talking to him this morning, I guess, watching the Grammys. They had theater owners on, and none of them said anything about this last night. But obviously, this is critical. Number three, when will restaurant revitalization fund be open for all eligible restaurants?
I bet I know where the answer. Yep.
Yep, and a very good. I don't know's win today. John, what's going on with this fund?
Well, I mean, first off, the demand, in my opinion, for the restaurant revitalization fund will exceed PPP first round. I mean, I think there's going to be, 2x, 3x as many of folks that apply for this, then there'll be money available. So obviously the lenders here certainly push your clients to be ready for this program. Just to give you some numbers from the National Restaurant Association, restaurant industry sales in 2020 were $659 billion. So they were down about $240 billion. Now, obviously, you're going to have restaurants that are not going to fit this program, but $240 billion is a pretty good number of what the total pool of lost revenue.
What is that, 25%, if my math is semi-accurate?
Roughly.
Yeah.
A little more than that, actually. But yes, it's significant.
So significant. John, what is your interest in restaurants revitalization? How do you interact with this program and with restaurants?
Well, I think with many of our bank clients, and certainly there are a lot of troubled restaurant loans out there that we've done work for. Obviously, there's no better economic action than free money. And so, this would essentially allow a restaurant to pretend that 2020 didn't happen. And obviously, that would be a huge boon. Now, the way the formula is going to work here is you're going to have to subtract your PPP dollars. So, for example, let's say you did $1 million in revenue in 2019, and let's just say 2020 was $500,000. So you were $500,000 less. You got a PPP loan for $100,000, so you'd be entitled to a $400,000 grant. Now, I suspect that the SBA, which is burdened again with another program, has learned some lessons from PPP, and I suspect that the early money for this will probably go out to the smaller restaurants. There'll probably be an effort made here to make sure that it doesn't go to Dave & Buster's or some of the large restaurant chains that don't have franchises. But yeah, I mean, this is significant. I mean, you're talking about wiping the slate clean on 2020. So yeah, I mean,
again, we have the first 21 days will be set aside for, I assume that'll also be lower amount of loans, but it's set aside for the women, veterans, et cetera, owners. John, how long do you think this fund will be good for before it gets
a week?
Really? Okay. Is that Lance is nodding? So
I have a long history in my family, and we actually lease some commercial space to restaurants. So, we have the opportunity to communicate with existing small restaurants. In fact, one of them will fall in one of the economically disadvantaged categories. And I will, as soon as this is available, be encouraging them to jump in and attempt to get some of this money. There are some restaurants that performed incredibly well in 2020, but most of those are your, Domino's Pizza of the world, not Jeff's Barbecue or, the mom and pop. Those restaurants struggled mightily with not only being shut down for a period of time, but working at limited capacity for most of the year. So I agree with John. The demand will far outstrip the supply of money in this.
Yeah, it's not clear if bars only would be eligible or if it's just restaurants that also have a bar. But there's a lot of stuff out here that we don't know yet.
Jump down to the last bullet point, John. How much of a documentation trail will the grantee need to provide?
Well, I think it's always safe to assume more than what's initially presented by the government. You're not going to go broke doing that. So I suspect that they will mirror some of the processes built on PPP. And, it's not clear if you get the grant, once they've granted you the money, I don't know how easy it is to claw, I don't know if because, PPP was a loan that was then forgiven. So a grant does have some different legal ramifications.
I'm sorry, John, you mentioned PPP. I assume that's first and second draw are deducted from this amount?
Correct. So that example, you would not get your PPP. You wouldn't be able to double dip with the PPP.
What about idle? What about idle advances, Lance?
Don't know.
I don't think they're going to come into play either.
You mean they're going to be deducted as well? We don't know. We don't
know, but I would suspect.
Bill doesn't say. We've kind of quoted it right here. All they're saying is basically PPP round 1 and 2. They haven't really said anything about idle yet.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that a restaurant's going to have to do that gets this, there'll be a new niche in the accounting field for gathering expenses. But if the restaurant dumps it into their operating account and writes payroll checks and rent and utility bills, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
What's interesting here too is you've had a lot of restaurants that have closed permanently.
Yeah.
And so are they eligible, or do they say, well, let's reopen now? That could be very.
John makes an exceptional point, Bob and Katie. The restaurants that closed, this could be enough money for them to reopen.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's interesting because if you were not operating in the last half of 2020, then are you eligible for all of those lost revenues as well? Interesting. John, in your, I know you were talking to the National Restaurant Association. What are they saying?
Well, I think, unfortunately, for the bankers in this room, I always like to say that the best thing about banks is the phone rings all the time. The worst thing about banks is the phone rings all the time. And the restaurant associations are revving up their customers, and you will be deluged with requests to access this program. So be prepared. They did a webinar last week. There's all these kind of webinars like this where we, don't know the details yet. So my guess is this is all speculation until we see the list of rules, and then I'm sure there'll be 4 or 5 iterations of those rules.
Well, and this is probably going to be like Idle. It'll be a direct to SBA application process.
So the banks won't be involved, except to encourage their clients to do it.
Katie, what else is in the bill that we've missed?
I think we've pretty much covered it all, at least for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. It seems like we just don't have a lot of details on how it's going to be implemented yet. I think the SBA is going to have to build the back-end system for that for borrowers to apply and things like that, or applicants, I should say. It's not a loan. Other than that, I think it's just a waiting game to find out all the rules and how it will work. All we really know is the amounts of money that was given and things like that. Something to note, though, they did up that amount that was given to the program. It was around $25 billion when they first introduced it, and it got up to $28.6 billion in the newer version. So they are anticipating it being a little more popular than it was originally. But other than that, I think we've pretty much covered it all.
That may give us, 2 more days, John? Is that what you're saying?
I think this opens up the question we talked about before is like, this could be, you have some real issues here with, okay, I would call it a throwing good money after bad problem, right? I mean, do we really want to bring back to life restaurants that have shuttered, which will then provide increased competition to the restaurants that have made it on some level? So this is going to be a tricky one.
Well, John, the other thing that gets me, what about those brave entrepreneurs who jumped out in 2020 and opened a new restaurant and are struggling as a result of it? Will they be eligible? Because they're saying you have to compare 19 to 20, but what about somebody who was brave enough to open a restaurant in April of 2020? Are they going to get left out?
Yeah. There's always unintended consequences, so we'll see how this works. Katie, I'm looking at our script and I realize we are not addressing the PPP extension date for second draw. There was legislation introduced. Do you know anything more about that? Give me a quick recap of it.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of details yet. What it's just going to be doing is basically extending it from what it is now to the end of May. Or at least that's the one that's actually been introduced in Congress. There are some letters circulating that want it to go to the end of June, and there's another letter that wants it to go to the end of the year. So we don't really know if this end of May date's going to stick or not, but if it does, what they're saying is they want to go until the end of May, and then any loans that are still held up by the hold codes and things like that will have another month to be approved after that.
John, do you see that date being extended?
100%.
Good. Thank you. Okay.
Hey, Bob, you know what date I would push for if I was in Congress? The end of the SBA fiscal year. Just run it through September 30 or when funds run out.
There you go. Very good. Let's see. What do we have here? Calculations. What was the update, Katie?
Yeah, so the SBA has updated their FAQs for PPP, and what they've done is essentially they're taking all the information that we had from the Economic Aid Act, and they've implemented that in there, as well as some of the recent changes with things like the new calculation for corporations and things like that. So that's all included in there. They're also going to update, they actually already have updated the way to calculate loans for first and second draw, and it walks you through how to calculate those given the new information that we have.
Katie, what's going on with these 11-12 payments? We're getting a lot of questions on it. What happens if, let's say, the payment's $10,000 and the borrower's not making the $1,000 payments? What's happening?
Yeah, so as we already know from previous IFRs, the 11-12 payments cover up to $9,000, and then it's the borrower's responsibility to pay the amount in excess. If the borrower has a pooled loan and is unable to pay the excess, then the lender may submit a principal-only deferment request through Coleman and that will handle that. On a 504 loan, it's going to be a little different. They're going to have to submit a deferment catch-up plan to CSA and to cover that outstanding balance.
What would Lance do? Lance, your customer comes in and they're supposed to pay $10,000 a month, and the government's doing $9,000, and they can't even do the $1,000. What does Lance do?
I think that you would submit for a principal payment deferment during the period, hoping that they got in better shape over that short period of time and could make the payments coming out. Another thing, it was in this just to make sure everyone's aware, because I've been asked this question, it does indicate that you should not charge late payment fees.
Right.
On these.
Good point. Good point. What happens if the business is out of business? You just close the doors and the government's paying $9,000. What do we do?
Well, you ask a tough question, Bob, because if it's out of business, it technically should be put into liquidation, and if it's in liquidation, it should not be getting the payments. So, but there will be businesses that may not be open that are still in current servicing status for a variety of reasons. Bob, we've all had the little SBA loan where they were not able to continue the business, but they continued to make the payments, and we just let them continue to pay until the loan paid off. But it's kind of a difficult path to navigate. Technically, if they're closed, they should be in liquidation because that constitutes a default.
John, as the director of a CDC, do you have any issue with that?
Well, I mean, clearly, if the government is making, sorry, like back of me, government's making the loan payments for you.
It's more of an emphasis when the lights go on and off. That means pay particular attention to this. This is really important.
It's a question, is it good for the SBA? Is it good for the business? Is it good for the CDC? I mean, clearly it's good for the CDC or any lender for the government to make payments on the borrower's behalf. I mean, that's self-evident.
Very good.
Yeah, you're going to reduce your principal balance, and when it does in fact go into liquidation, your recoverable value, you're going to have to recover less because the principal balance has been reduced.
Katie, what's the ABA report on PPP demand? What's the American Bankers Association saying?
Yeah, so they had this report. I believe they published it officially yesterday. I didn't see it before then, but it is dated March 3rd. And what they're saying is PPP in this third round so far, which is from January to present day, PPP is held pretty steady. We're seeing a little bit of a dip toward the end, that February 14 to February 21st. But it is staying pretty consistent, so there is still a need. And I think what they're arguing here, or what we can gather from this, is that we still need the program. There's still need for it. It hasn't dropped even as low as what it was last year in round 2. So I think we're still going to need the program for a little while, and that need hasn't dipped too low yet.
Very good. Nice chart. But that's ABA. That's interesting.
Yes.
And that was put together by Treasury. Very good. Let's see. Katie, you talked about the new SBA 504 refinancing rules to allow borrowers to maximize their CRE equity withdrawals. Are we concerned, John, about cash flow? It says now the CDC has the unilateral authority to do this.
I mean,
how are you guys approaching it? Go ahead.
I mean, I can't speak for Summercore on this.
No, I'm not asking you to just,
But, it does seem to me this does create an interesting conflict of interest issue with CDCs. After all, a good source of their business comes from the third-party lenders, and now you're giving them permission to refinance their customers. So, of course, 504 loans get refinanced by existing lenders too, the other way, but this is sort of interesting because, and we all know the 504 loan is typically better terms and conditions than the third-party loan. So this is a pretty powerful incentive, but obviously this has some delicate relationship issues.
Lance, we're going to be talking about this on Wednesday, aren't we?
Absolutely, Bob, and trying to get best practices and guidance on how to do it properly.
Interest rates, what's appropriate, what's prudent, what should be looking at, use of proceeds are very clearly in terms of defining them. Very good. Real quick, PPP Answer Desk is out there. It is hopping. I know Katie and Lance are doing a good job on that. Well, thank you very much. And we finished the franchise report, so we'll talk a little bit more about that, Lance. But it is we've done something different. I don't have time to go into it today. But the top 10 we did by cohorts. So instead of just giving you a number, you can go back to the actual year and say, hey, what happened in the year 2015 on that specific loan performance? And we broke that out for the top 25 industries. So there's a little bit more. Yeah, go ahead.
And I encourage you to get a copy of this because just today, Bob, I had a franchise opportunity come in. I was not aware of the franchise. You know, first I go to SBA's franchise list to make sure it's an approved franchise, but the second thing I pull out is my Coleman 2020. I don't have the 2021 yet. Franchise report to find out how much lending activity there was and how many charge-offs. So it's a great report when looking for loan opportunities.
Yeah, very good. Hey, John, thank you very much. I know you're busy. Thank you for your time. Great report on what's going on with the restaurants. Let's get you back. Are you involved with the shuttered venue at all? Are you going to be working on that, or are you more interested in restaurants?
I don't know much about the shutter anymore, more of the restaurants.
Okay, very good. Well, we will certainly, as we get closer to get this implemented, we'll get you back, and we appreciate your time. Thank you all for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Yeah.